Our topic for today is a variety of approaches to leader speeches. So let's get a little bit of an idea of how many people here are, I guess, speakers who speak first, and also people who, I guess, are going to be a little bit more excited about this presentation as a result. So, uh, if you happen to speak first, you could try raising your hand. You could show me that you have an interest in this PPT because you do it yourself. All right, so we have a pretty large amount of people actually. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. Yeah, that's like pretty large amount of people. Okay, so for the rest of you that did not raise your hands, which is roughly I think like 66% right now, um, this is actually very helpful for you. And the reason I think it's helpful for you is because you really do need to understand how to use your partners. So in most debate speeches, you have a massive dependence on whatever your partner says. Leader speeches are some of the few speeches where you don't have any dependence at all on really anything. You are the first speaker in the round. If you guys speak deputy, those of you in this workshop who don't speak first, remember that understanding the mindset with which your first speaker is thinking and also recognizing how to utilize their talents the best for you is also very helpful. So as you watch this workshop, think about which type of speaker here would be the best debate partner for you if you don't have a teammate or something. And of course, which one of these skill sets do you want your partner to develop? Because if you're very good at one thing, another thing might be helpful for you, and so on. Okay, as always, some caveats. First, this is not at all like anything new. I'm not going to be like creating new knowledge here. I'm just synthesizing information that's already out there. There's lots of great workshops and lots of people with lots of experience that you can see as well. Second, all of this is not comprehensive either. So there's obviously a lot more than what I'm going to say, right? Like debate is a massive, massive sport with lots of people and lots of different skill sets and techniques. So anything here that seems like it's not covering what you find comfortable does not imply that what you find comfortable isn't good. It just means that it's not something I included in this PPT. I just try to include like the big ones. Third of all, throughout the PPT, I'm going to be asking after each slide if anyone is confused about something I talked about. So please just message in the chat if you have a confusion or some kind of doubt you want to clear, and I'm happy to go through that in each slide. Okay, cool. Here we go. This is our agenda. So first we're going to talk about the aims. Also, yes, I do have a video game themed PPT. I think it's cute. So we'll talk about what it is a leader speech is supposed to do, because unless you know exactly what you're trying to do, you will struggle to do well at leader speaking. Then we're going to talk about strategy. I'm not going to be focusing on the details of analysis or impacting or responses. There are like 5,000 workshops that do that very well. In fact, I literally have a workshop on impacting. You can watch that if you're interested. There are people who are much better than me at PMLO who've done PMLO workshops. You can watch those as well. Um, but I'm going to talk about how you need to think about your PM speeches, how to make sure you maximize the utilization of what you have and you cover what you don't have. Then I'll talk about styles. So this is where I have a little fun experiment. I'm going to identify different types of speakers because contrary to popular belief, first speakers, despite our reputation for being the less exciting ones sometimes, are very diverse and interesting people, right? There's a reason that a lot of times the top speaker in the world is a first speaker. So I think Toomey, yeah, in 2025 is an example of that. 2024 was Tejas. 2023 was Hadar, who is a first speaker. 2022 was Kato, who is a first speaker. 2021 was Tin, who is a first speaker. 2020, I think was, well, technically it was Backpack one or two, but I think it was the second speaker of that team, Chin. Um, okay, so let's go through those styles to recognize which type of first speaker you are. It's a little bit of an astrology type thing, but it'll help you understand your strengths and weaknesses. Then we'll talk about practice. Obviously, you need to practice to be good, and I'll tell you how to do that. So let's start with aims, right? So what is your mission as a first speaker? So let's find out. We're gonna unveil your mission. Three things you need to do in order to be a good first speaker. First, you need to clarify the debate. Now, this is what a lot of people call characterization or framing or uh, setup or world building. Just on world building, I just want to point out you are not a fantasy writer with 15 books and a series. You cannot really do world building in a speech. All of these things are different skill sets, but they all refer to the same thing, which is you're trying to set the stage of the debate in your favor. So, what does that mean? Well, think of it like selecting the rules or the stage for your battle, right? So, what does that mean? First of all, what is the motion? What does it actually mean? That's a really important question because it's not about the key terms. A lot of people will give dictionary definitions of terms, just explain them. It's pretty irrelevant. You want to identify an exact instance of what the motion looks like in the real world. So, for example, if there's a debate about a narrative, it's not enough to just say this narrative refers to, I don't know, like the glorification of motherhood, right? This refers to glorifying motherhood. No, you need to identify what it is that's happening in this narrative. So, um, you know, when you're pregnant, you get treated so amazingly by your family. You constantly get asked questions about when you're having a child. There's a lot of pressure on you to make sure you continue the lineage of your family, and that comes through the glorification of things like you know uh, how amazing it is that you're raising a family, or how it's sort of a labor of love, stuff like that. You want to give concrete examples that show these things and the trade-offs that they encapsulate. So I don't know, you want to get a job, and then someone says, well, someone has to take care of the kids, and then someone else says, that's the most meaningful job you could do. And that's one way you could talk about how glorification of motherhood could create a trade-off with other things. Then there's the three other stuff, right? So where is it most relevant? This is what a lot of people get confused. Framing, characterization, and all these words mean different things, right? Framing is something that exists in academic theory in some contexts, like in political science, for example. In debating, it's used for a lot of different things. But the word framing is like putting a frame on something, right? So, how do you put a frame on something? You focus on one specific aspect of something. So, for example, you might say this debate is most relevant in the developing world for a host of reasons. That would be a way to do framing. This debate is most relevant for swing voters. That's a way to do framing. Then you want to identify the trade off. Remember, be reasonable with this trade off. So, what do you give up and what do you get? And then ideally, you want to tell the judge how you're going to win in this whole context you just set up, right? So you're like, oh, we're debating this in poor countries, and we're focusing on places with corrupt governments. This is about whether those corrupt governments should be given international aid, or they should not be given international aid. And the trade off here is they might be able to provide some services better, but they also might be able to consolidate their power. Uh, so in this case, what is your strategy? Right? How are you going to win? Well, a lot of times you need to tell the judge that in order to be clear. What else do you do? Well, you do analysis. You can't escape analysis. You can never escape analysis. Otherwise, you're not debating. Just like doing rhetoric, or like just like describing the world for 4 minutes is a like instantly. So don't do that. Do analysis. So a good first speaker analyzes their team's case comparatively and robustly. So comparatively here means every time you give a reason, explain why it's not true on the other side or worse. And robustly means that your reasons themselves have multiple layers of defenses. So lots of mechanisms is one way to do this. You could also just have strong mechanisms, which depend on a good characterization or intuitive analysis or empirical evidence. Um, the third thing is setting up your partner to win. So, analysis is pretty cool, right? You see the picture there, a pretty weird thing that I don't think you can do in CS very often. It's just like knifing someone in the head through a wall. Well, setting up your partner to win is the other thing over there, which is when someone gets flashbanged by someone else, so someone else can shoot them more easily. In other words, there is always your one job, which is to do really well as a first speaker. But one of your most crucial jobs, possibly the most crucial job, is to set up your partner. And that's really important to understand, right? Other than making it clear what's happening and then making an argument, you are setting up for the second speech. And we're going to talk a bit more about that in strategy, but it's really important to recognize this is your mission. Okay. What is the debate about? What does it look like? What is the context? Obviously, in your favor. Analysis for your argument and rebuttals and whatever you want to talk about. So we'll get to that in a second. And remember, it should always be like the top priority in your mind to set up your partner to win. Okay. Uh, I see no questions. That's great. So, how do you win? The answer is the 1 2. All right. So, the number of people in a debate team, much like my IQ, is 2. And 2 is more than 1. So, you might be one speaker, but there's another speaker coming. So, how do you win? Well, you make sure you use both speakers. So, what exactly should a PM or LO speaker be thinking about? Well, first of all, what does the motion ask of you, right? What are the low hanging fruits on both sides? What are its burdens? So, this is the obvious arguments, right? So, if it's a debate about something related to like trade deals and the world becoming more torn apart, one advantage of free trade, of course, is cheaper products and faster uh, flow of information and research. A disadvantage that's also quite obvious is that it kills local industries because of high levels of competition. These are sort of things that are debatable in the sense that you can give responses to them, right? There's a lot of very talented debaters you'll see across the world giving lots of reasons as to why banning drugs would not reduce drug consumption. That one might actually be kind of believable in some cases, maybe. But then you also have arguments like, um, you know, reducing regulations will really help the quality of the product. Again, possible. But the thing is, it's a little unintuitive, right? And the reason for that is because most low hanging fruits are going to give you some level of impact pretty much no matter what happens, simply through the force of reality and so many things in reality that support that claim. So you generally want to take advantage of those low-hanging fruits because there are very obvious benefits to the motion or harms to the motion that the CA is intended you to be able to use as impact. So grab that very quickly, identify how to prove it, right? That's the first step. The second step is really important. What skill set is required to win with that argument? Now, every argument has to be proven, and then the argument has to be positioned, right? So it needs to be relevant and it needs to be true. Of course, you can just spend your time proving an argument, but that's not a great idea. You generally want to do a little bit more than just prove that something will happen, unless it's like this incredible thing that's just going to instantly win you the round. So, generally, you want to check which type of skill set matters. Now, for example, it's a very high burden argument, right? Like it's a really difficult to prove argument. Well, then the skill set that's required is mechanization. So, for example, you're trying to prove that something is going to cause massive economic recession, or it's going to cause severe mental health concerns in a large population. Well, it's already hard to even prove those impacts because of the way that motions work, unless, of course, the motion is designed to have big impacts. But it is sometimes possible and strategic to go for these big arguments. Of course, as long as you're keeping that spectrum of impacts. In that case, you want to run a mechanization focused speech. But sometimes the debate is a lot more about engagement, and it's going to end up becoming a decision on who is more likely to be true. So a lot of that depends on how you respond to things. And if you're a PM, then how you preempt things. In another context, you might have a debate that's very much about framing, right? In the context in which the motion benefits your side, you're just winning, like straight up. And in the context in which it benefits their side, you're just straight up losing. And the debate just becomes about which frame matters. So, for example, if you have a debate about a social movement, it might be a very persuasive social movement strategy in, say, um, a rural area, right? But it might have massive failures and costs in an urban area? Well, the debate is now about which one matters more. And how do you figure out sort of these little things in a debate motion? Obviously, one of the things is practice, but the other thing is also just think about what is intuitive, right? Like, of course, you're not going to match the judge's intuition all the time, but to some extent, there are some quite obvious things that you will clock. Like, for example, if you have a debate about art, right, and the funding of the arts, okay, it's probably going to benefit artists to have more money, right? So, like, it's a bit difficult to argue it's not going to benefit artists. Um, but perhaps, funding a certain type of art might harm something else that would have been funded otherwise. So, for example, if it's art education in schools, that money might have gone to other types of education, like the sciences. And then making an argument that switching from educating engineers and doctors to educating artists is going to make engineers and doctors better is extremely stupid. So you're never going to try to win that clash. You're just going to try to frame it out somehow. So you'll see people saying things like, this is something that the private sector will invest in, or this is already rising, or we need a counter narrative to the prevailing status quo. These are all ways to frame something into the round. So there's lots of different skill sets you can use to win an argument. And identifying which one of those skill sets is needed is very important for a first speaker because you're the first speaker. You set up how the case is going to run, and you need to know the structure of that very clearly. You need to know which part of the argument needs to be focused on. Then you want to split up your strategy. Okay, it's very important. Do not leave content for your second speaker. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying pick what you'll focus on. So maybe the debate is about framing, and you are good enough at framing and comfortable enough that you can push it. Maybe you're not the best at framing, and you want to focus a lot more on something that's like the second most important, and you want your second speaker to focus on the framing because they're better than you at it. Maybe your second speaker is better at responses than you are. Maybe your second speaker is better at, like, you know, characterization. They just know more about the topic in some context. Remember, you want to know that going in. You want to know which parts you can do well, which parts you can't do well, and then you want to split that strategic focus across your team. So this is sort of the way you want to think about how you give first speeches. Um, so the pictures here are very helpful. I think they're really um, informative. But basically, you see the guy over there with the hand up. That's a spike in volleyball. Well, you can't spike without a setter, right? And the thing about debating is that in a lot of team combinations, um, the way it works is that the first speaker sets and the second one spikes. In other words, the first speaker sets the person up to push the main claim. That's just because of how, like, time works, right? Like, your second speaker would have to do more things that are directly responsive. But it also has a lot to do with sort of what the first speaker can do. You know, they can do a lot of planning. They can do a lot of setup. They can really create the space required for a second speaker to just really go crazy. And that, I think, is a very underrated skill sometimes. A good example of this, I think, is Jason Shaw. If anyone's ever seen him speak first, he is amazing, like an incredible first speaker. And I can promise you that if you take any good second speaker in the world, of course, Jason's partner is an exceptional second speaker, right? One of the best in the world ever. But if you took any good second speaker and you put them with Jason, they'd have so much space to do whatever they wanted because of how robustly he sets up for different skill sets in second speaker. So, think about it when you are prepping for majors or tournaments, or just in general practicing. Think about what you can do and what your partner can do, and how you can combine that to make your team more powerful. Okay, so now we have a quiz for engagement. So, based on everything you've heard so far, guys, which of these can a PM or LO not do? Comment your answers in the chat. A, B, C, D. This will also tell me what people think. Very curious. All right, I'm very excited about these answers. Keep going, guys. Send them in. No judgment here. All right. So, uh, I'm going to take this for now. Let's go through each answer one by one. So, there's very few people who said C. In fact, by very few, I mean zero. So, everyone agrees that a PM or LO speaker can characterize and analyze their own argument. That's good. And that's why I made this quiz. I'm so glad that we're sort of going to work through this together. Yes, a first speaker does characterize and analyze their own argument, and that is, in the traditional sense, their main role. The second most, sorry, the third most common is D. We'll get to that in a second. So there seems to be almost an even split between. No, it is not an even split. Most of you have given A, and some of you have given B. So let's talk about B. Weigh against other teams' arguments. So maybe I'll give you guys the benefit of the doubt, and I'll assume you meant this specifically for PM, right? Because PM hasn't heard anything. Uh, so I'm not gonna say you're wrong in a mean way. I'll say it in a nice way. I understand why you think this way, but you are wrong. So here's why. So if you don't weigh against another team's argument, you're not a bad first speaker inherently. It's not like you're instantly bad or something, or you're doing something wrong. But you definitely can, and in some cases you kind of have to, even in your PM speech. So for example, if someone is debating the motion for supporting long termism, okay, and the opposition claim isn't made yet, you might not know the other team's arguments, and it's fair to argue you can't really weigh against the exact versions of those arguments. Fine, you don't know them yet, but is it really that complicated to figure out what the opposition to long termism is? No, it's short termism, right? Like it's not long termism. So at that point, regardless of what happens, your impacts support, in most cases, unless they do a little bit of like co-opting or whatever, or like some weird other pathway to victory, you're pushing for long-term impacts and they're pushing for short-term impacts. So ideally, you can just weigh on that, right? Like before anything happens, you can just start your PM speech with, here are a few reasons why we should care about the long term more than the short term anyway. And frankly, that's relevant. That is relevant weighing. And remember, weighing is analysis, right? Weighing is not like something in the clouds. You can absolutely do it as analysis that adds persuasive value to your claim. So if long-term policy is more important than short-term policy for three or four metrics, that makes your argument more persuasive, even if opposition hasn't pushed their case yet, because the status quo or the alternative just naturally will have more short-termism than long-termism, just based on the way the motion is worded. So the truth is, PM and LO speakers can weigh against other teams' arguments. The other very common answer is A, heavily engage with other teams' arguments. So here's the thing. Um, you might not notice this, but if you just watch a top room in World Championships or in European Championships or the Asian Championships or anything really, this is kind of all leader speakers do. So leader speakers actually engage a lot. In fact, the worst part of being a leader speaker sometimes is that you have to engage almost at the same level, if not better, than a whip. Uh, but you don't know what the arguments are, because you just have to predict them. So what you'll notice is so much preemption, but it's not preemption in the sense that someone says they're going to say this, but that's not true. It's preemption in the sense that when you make an argument, the other side has responses to that argument that benefit them. So, for example, if you're just like doing a policy debate about like rural to urban migration, okay, Obviously, when you say rural to urban migration is bad because, I don't know, cities become overcrowded, there's no space, people get health issues, there's no jobs, they get abused, there's harassment. Well, obviously, opposition is going to say uh, they make more money, there's better infrastructure, uh, freedoms, being able to move, because sometimes this requires you to limit things. Well, most leader speakers know this and integrate responses into the claims from the other side into their speeches. In fact, it's almost a necessity if you want to be a good leader speaker. You have to think about the other side. If you're not doing that, you're on the back foot, right? Because a good leader speaker is engaging. In fact, they're engaging often more than they are constructing, simply because that makes construction easier, as we'll get to in a second. So it's a very commonly held belief that, the rebuttal guy goes second and the construction guy goes first. Um, Not physical construction. Oh, that would be pretty cool if you like made a building in a debate room. But like the constructive speaker goes first. And that is generally, I guess, like good advice. It's just that you do have to do rebuttals, right? If you cannot engage and respond as a first speaker, uh, you're screwed. Like I have nothing else to say. It's just true. So they definitely can do this. In fact, they really should. And for those of you who are second speakers in this workshop, and you have partners who are first speakers, and you go like, they're terrible at rebuttal. I'm so good at this. Well, tell them. Tell them what the rebuttals are, and then they'll integrate them into their speech. Because ideally, a first speech should have every single thing both teammates can come up with during that 15-minute time period, right? That you can fit within that 7 minutes. Because remember, don't leave anything for the second speaker. That's stupid. There is infinite content. There will always be more content. Don't worry about that. So yeah, uh, it's not A either. So two people, which is Piyush Ratan and Guhan Swaminathan, and also Tamanna Dagar. Fine. So that's three people have picked D. And D is, in fact, correct. Here is some fun WDC manual trivia for all of you. All right. If you do not accept POIs in your speech, here is what the rules of the World Championships manual say. If a speaker has not accepted a POI, judges must remind the room to accept POIs after the speaker has finished speaking. I want you guys to focus on the word must. I'm sure we all know the difference between must and may or could. They are required to remind you. Not only that, judges must treat a failure to take a POI as reducing the persuasiveness of that speaker's contribution. So they can lower speaker scores, adjust the margin of victory, or flip close calls because of it. What does that mean? It means judges have to penalize you for not taking POIs, assuming sufficient were provided. And that means that if a judge does not penalize speakers for not taking a POI, they are doing it wrong. They are not judging according to the rules. And if a speaker does not take POIs, by the way, I don't have that section in this PPT, but it does say in the manual that you have to take POIs. But I was hoping that you guys could figure it out from the fact that judges punish you for it, that you have to take POIs. Speakers have to take POIs. So if you go back to the fun little quiz we had, if you reject all points of information, judges have to punish you. That's how it works. You have to take points of information. Do you dislike points of information? Okay, too bad. You have to take them. Get used to it. It kind of sucks sometimes, but I would argue it's actually very helpful because it literally is live feedback as you speak about the things that you're messing up. And God forbid you reject a point of clarification. As a first speaker, if you reject a point of clarification, um, there is this scene in Rap Devil when Machine Gun Kelly is holding a shovel and he's digging, and then in Kill Shot, in the diss against him, Eminem says, "You spent your whole day just digging your own grave." That's what you're doing. You think you're cool. I don't need a point of clarification. That's deranged. That's unhinged. Don't do that. A point of clarification is not to mess you up. A point of clarification to stop is to stop the debate from going off the rails. as long as it doesn't manifest an automatic loss, why does it matter as a speaker? Because if you don't take a POI and you are winning by 1 point, you are now losing. That's how that works. A close call is the smallest call possible is 1 point. Check your tabs and check your ballots and see how many times you've beaten a team by more than 2 points. Just look it up. And you will see BP in most cases is not a very big gap game. It's quite close, especially when it's a confusing round. So, first of all, it matters as a speaker because you will lose more rounds. The second reason it matters as a speaker, 1 point is a big deal for your speaker average, especially 1 point every round. Third of all, and this is the most important one, if you do not take POIs, especially in top half, you might die the second the back half starts speaking. Like your case is gone. Because there is this very funny thing about POIs. Technically, POIs are most useful when they're most destructive because they delay the speaker, they sort of distract them. But that's not really true. The worst POIs are the ones that don't really tell you what the case is and then, confuse you anyway, make you look dumb, make you waste time. But most speakers don't do that. They just ask the best possible question, which points out a gap in your speech. Plus, they kind of have to at least point out some big gap in your speech. So, what does that mean? That means that you get auto feedback in the moment. Okay. So, just like how in real life, avoiding difficult things doesn't make you good, in debate, avoiding rebuttals doesn't make your arguments stronger. Is it bad practice to delay clarifications later in the speech if you're still on setup and framing? It is incredibly unhinged in my opinion. Like, I guess you technically can do it. It's just think of it logically, okay? What if you set up a model that is incoherent and then someone asks you a question that breaks down the logic of that model, right? You want clarifications as early as possible. Okay, if you don't, here's the thing about clarifications. Clarifications are sometimes things that you don't need to clarify. Okay, so you can be like, this is not important, I don't think this is important to answer. That's assuming the person asking the question isn't like really talking in good faith, hasn't thought it through. But on the off chance it's not, even if there's a 20% chance that that question could derail your case, it is a terrible idea, right? So for example, there is a round where we had a debate against a team which pushed for a policy which I think in most cases would have been a policy that you would have had an exclusion for religious institutions for. Okay. They did not take my clarification throughout PM. The argument we then made was they have to stand by their model now, and we can win on just the backlash from religious institutions alone. And I really believe that was true in that round, and it could be true in your round too. Now, if you do that till the end of your speech and you've got like 1 minute left, what are you going to do? Right? Like, you've made a 6 minute argument dependent on the model, and someone points out that your model is technically weird. You're screwed. So, first of all, God forbid you don't take a clarification. Okay. Also, the fourth reason that I think both the people who are asking questions should note is it's terrible sportsmanship. Terrible sportsmanship. Um, People do not stay in a room listening to other people for 49 minutes so that you break the rules when they have an opportunity to make their life simpler. So if someone is trying to clarify the debate so that they don't have to deal with some mess in back half, 56 minutes of this talking that they're going to have to sit through, and you're just like, no, I don't want to waste like 10-15 seconds of my speech. It's just bad sportsmanship. Just don't do it. um so there's also that reason. But yeah, if you don't take POIs, uh you will have a worse speech. You will most likely miss something really cool and important that you had to clarify. Oh, and by the way, one of the best things about taking POIs is just like, if you're the first speaker, you should take POIs much more than your second speaker, because now your second speaker knows what they're going to say. Like, a lot of times teams will get super excited and say like their strongest rebuttal to the first speaker, and they'll be like, ah, we got him, right? And then the second speaker just like rebuilds. So it's very important to take POIs. And finally, why does it matter as a speaker? Another question that I, so another way to answer this that I want to think about is, why does it matter that you're not supposed to walk up to someone in a debate and just like shout in their face or like slap them, right? Like it's just rude. And also it's against the rules, right? Why don't you just talk for like 7 minutes, 30 seconds? Why don't you just take the timer and throw it out the window, right? Like there is, I think, some level of moral value to following the rules, right? Everyone else follows the rules. If you choose not to follow the rules when everyone else is doing it, even if no one cares, which is unlikely because it's very bad sportsmanship, even if it doesn't affect your like quality as a speaker, which is like very unlikely, if you can't even take like caution during your speech, um, you're going to be much worse at adapting to situations. Uh, I would argue it's just wrong. Like not following the rules is wrong, so you should do it. Uh, so yeah, those are some reasons for taking POIs. But yeah, the biggest reason is this one, right? Like, do you not care about your speaker score or like winning? But yeah, okay, let's move on. So, skills. This is the fun part of the PPT where we go through the actual variety of approaches. So, let's unveil the first type of speaker. For those of you who are gamers, this will be interesting. For those of you who are not, it will also be interesting. Depiction of a real debater. So I have taken the consent of four debating friends who I think fit these sort of archetypes. But this is generally what most debaters tend to do, good or bad. So, for example, maybe you're good at mechanization, right? You're very good at constructive analysis. What does that mean? So, you have a highly technical thought process. You're very comfortable focusing on link chains and burdens of proof. You've got a broad empirical knowledge, you know a lot of things. This doesn't mean like, oh my god, I know so much about like Keynesian economics or something. Like that's not what it means. It means you know a lot of different things. um, Clear explanations that leave few gaps and demand strong responses. So I just copied the speaker scale here, right? Like you explain things well. This does not mean big words. It also does not mean that you have 55 reasons for whatever you say. It just means that when you say something to a judge, it makes sense and it's quite difficult to say it's not reasonable or not true. So how do you use your strengths? Well, first of all, focus on your weakest links. So a lot of people end up running like cases where they go like 55 reasons as to why the free market will lead to higher investment. And it's like, yes, that is how the free market works, right? Because the government probably has less money than everyone else. Although that's fairly debatable in, depending on the sector. So you want to analyze the things that are going to be targeted. So that's one good way to utilize your strength. Remember, obviously, you have to analyze every link, but focus on the things that are going to be targeted. So in a free market debate, what's going to be targeted is probably trickle down, which is like, okay, so there's going to be lots of companies competing. So what? Who do they pay? They don't pay anyone. They pay like CEOs and no one makes money. Okay, prove why they'll have to pay people. Second, target high burden impacts along a spectrum. Okay, so build up to bigger and bigger and bigger impacts. So you have the advantage of being able to make things true. So make bigger and bigger things true and give yourself an advantage. This is a really good way to sort of set yourself as the foot forward when your second speaker presumably does a bunch more like positioning, responses, and on so on. So what does that look like? Like for example, you've proven that something makes a few people happy sometimes. Explain how that might lead to communities forming. Remember, that doesn't mean you start with the crazy impact. Sometimes people who do that just lose. I definitely know that I also mess this up very often. But like, don't make crazy claims from the beginning. Try to build up to them. Make sure that you show the logical flow of how small things can grow into bigger things. A broad range of things can occur. How to cover your weaknesses? Well, you do need to be somewhat offensive, in the sense that you need to attack, not like say something offensive. So you need to think of the other side's weakest burdens, right? Think of it this way. What if you had to run a case from op? What would you have to analyze? And then what would you struggle with? And then take that burden and then analyze it the other direction, right? So, in a government versus private sector debate, You'd probably want to argue the government is efficient. That's the weakest link, because sometimes people will say the government has no competition, it's corrupt, and so on. So you might want to have reasons for why it's efficient. Well, think about the opposite. Why is it inefficient? And just counter mechanize from the beginning, and try to engage directly with the reasons that they're going to use. Also, try to remember to be relevant and intuitive. So a lot of speakers I hear are very like technically proficient. Sometimes they make sense if you think about it logically, and I just know that if they just use like better examples, they would be very persuasive. But to a judge, they just sound like some robot who's just like the race to the top as a result of the profit signaling mechanism in the market is going to lead to increased output, productivity, or whatever. It's just like, okay, just say that people make better products when they have more products to compete with. So remember that you have to say things that are relevant to the case and the motion, because sometimes you might deviate from that in your 85 mechanisms. And remember to be intuitive, right? Don't just say stuff that's true, say stuff that sounds true. All right, so that's mechanization. Okay, now what's the next style of first speakers? The mage. All right, this is another friend of mine who is much more destructive. Okay, so think of outside speakers, right? You can see how angry uh, the image there looks. It's a very dangerous speaker because they're angry. So a lot of people who speak whip and first speaker are somewhat like this, right? They're very good at responses and deconstruction. They're very good at flipping claims. They've got a really good rebuttal technique, right? So they know what combination of mitigation or flips or repositioning actually works. Well, if you really like responses and your partner was like, nah, I want to speak second, and you were forced to speak first, which is, I get it. um, use your strengths by just giving a defensive leader speech. So remember how everyone thought, you can't do engagement in first speeches? You can. And a lot of good first speakers do just that. They just think of the best ways in which they can beat the other side's arguments. So think of it like your job is to make the case. You will make the case, but your passion is to burn people's arguments down, right? So you could just give like clarifications or characterizations or mitigations. So you could also just be like, for example, I had a debate round where I lost to a team that was quite good, but in that round, very defensive, which was about AI and whether AI is sort of a good thing or bad thing for humanity. And they were arguing it's a good thing, it shouldn't be regulated much, and so on. They claim that there's a lot of political will and technical capacity to regulate AI. And they spent almost 5.5 minutes in their PM speech just explaining how many ways there are and how many reasons there are for people to want to slow down AI that's dangerous. And that isn't their case, right? Their case is that AI is really good. But that's fine because their DPM could spend a bit more time on why AI is good. And in that round, the most useful thing they thought they could do was to defensively take out the best cases from op before it begins and then to run their case. And sometimes that really does work. The other thing you can do is just flip the other side's case, you can just run a flip. How do you cover your weaknesses? Well, one thing you could do is you could work on other skills, right? You need to be a well-rounded speaker, of course. Of course, to be clear, you need to have all of these skills to be a good debater. Obviously, I'm just talking about things that you might prefer as a speaker. But also, you could also consider speaking second. I really like these animations. Okay, now I'm going to. Oh no, I forgot to. All right, let's unveil the next one. Right. Maybe you just like strategy and positioning, right? Now, these two next sort of styles aren't really a thing. I mean, honestly, it's not common. I don't think like everyone does strategy, but you know that there's always that one dude who just doesn't want to do any work, and he's just like, "Bro, I've got this really good case that's just like brilliant," and they spend like 10 minutes not writing, just coming up with a case. Sort of like the crazy people, but also like the fun people. They're the ones who see debate like a puzzle. Now, I'm obviously a little biased, you can tell, because I do like thinking of debate very gamified way through like strategy and positioning. But the thing is, everyone does that, right? Everyone does that all the time. Everyone is thinking about how to do this. Everyone is thinking about how to run cases. This is if you just happen to like this so much that you do this to a point where it trades off against other things. So, for example, um, you know, the good thing is you think a lot about your path to victory, right? Sometimes debaters struggle to think about path to victory at all. They don't think about how their argument wins. They just think about why something is good or bad. If you naturally think very deeply about how to position your argument to win, you might be someone who really likes strategy. If you also are often creative and you're willing to risk being confusing or unintuitive or just weird in order to find pathways to victory, this might be something that you'd find useful. So how do you utilize those strengths? Like the first thing is uh, chill, right? Like calm down. So just run the stock. So one thing that you'll notice in a lot of debate rounds is that people who are starting off or are in the middle levels of debate will enter the top room and they'll be like, bro, I need a 5,000 IQ case to beat like, oh my god, I'm a bit old, so I don't know who it would be, but like in my time it would have been like Tin Pulich, okay? So how do you beat like these world champions, these amazing speakers, okay? Uh, a lot of people say, this amazing case that no one sees coming, but that's not true at all. That's really not a great way to win. A great way to win is to run the stock case that everyone expects. Is Tin a dino? Oh my. Yes, I think Tin counts as a dino. I think the first time he was in World's Finals was 2019. It's been 6 years. I feel like 6 years is enough for dino status. So yeah, uh, you integrate the implications of the analysis that is stock into your speech. So instead of running the most out of this world extension and back half, run a normal case. Just be very explicit about why it wins, right? Like identify the ways in which your case is better than any other version of the stock that the judge has seen. Any obvious responses to this case shouldn't work, and so on. So that's one great way to utilize your strengths if you're someone who finds yourself running weird cases, being creative, and all that. Be creative with the stock. You really can, and it's a lot more fun than you might think. How do you cover your weaknesses? Hedge your bets. Okay. You might think you've got this genius case in back half, but trust me, your partner is like crying right now. Okay. So as someone who has run, illustrious cases such as, lizards in NASA and the tech industry are going to destroy sexism and feminism. I can definitely confirm that sometimes you might think that a case is persuasive, but it's just stupid, and you don't realize that in the moment. And especially if you're a first speaker and you're running like a really cool case in top half, and you're like, oh my god, this is really gonna slap. You need to remember that the reason stock is there is called stock is for a reason, right? It's safe. Your partner needs to have the safe option ready for them. Okay, so at least 3.5 minutes of your speech, without fail, should be spent on something safe. Okay, like the basic stock, unless you're absolutely sure something creative is going to work and your partner like fully agrees with you and you just want to go all in. Please give your partner like a life ramp, right? Like, or what it's called, like the life tube thingy. Like throw them a bone basically. Don't just leave them out in the snow. Don't leave them alone to build a full case and rebut it and everything. Make sure to defend a basic simple case so they have something to survive on. All right, now we've got the fourth type. Now this is a little controversial because people might argue this is not really a type of speaker, but I would beg to differ. Right? This is a bard. I've put the illustrious Srinjoy Sen here, someone who I truly believe is not a human. But basically, this is the type of person who's just interesting and attention grabbing. So, you have good word choice, you're very persuasive, you just enrapture the judge with the way you speak. You make very unintuitive ideas sound very reasonable through the use of language, tone of voice, and body language, right? Now, this is not something that is just like a static quality of a human being, right? So everyone is very, very persuasive and charismatic in different contexts and different motions. So you might find yourself thinking, I know how to very beautifully present this particular argument because I know about this motion. And that's when your skill set is a lot more about style and storytelling. And I know that in BP, debating style is looked down upon a lot. Not looked down upon, but seen as very unimportant because technically we're not supposed to credit style unless it, contributes to the content. It's a part of the content. But that's exactly the point, right? Unless it contributes to the content. Style is content. Regardless of what anyone tells you, if you hear someone say something with a different expression, you've gotten more information. So it's not the fact that someone who is more persuasive through their style is saying less meaningful things. They're just saying it in a different way, and that way is very much valid in BP debating, right? We do credit it as long as it contributes to the persuasiveness of the speaker. It obviously can't be sophistry, but it can convey important things. So, that's important. And being interesting and grabbing the judge's attention for the specific things that might be important in your case is like a really powerful skill. So don't look down on people with good style. Uh, don't look too far up to them either, right? They also practice it. One thing I did not know, I had to learn this the hard way, which is that top debaters have really practiced their word choice so much that something that seemed natural to me, it's not natural. People really work on sounding good. So how do you use your strength? Well, one good way to do this is to set the background of the debate very clearly through like clear descriptions, because that might be something you're good at. Analysis about the context and the importance of your case. Why is it that your case is so important is something that is much more hard hitting when you're a more attention grabbing and interesting speaker, because it sets the stage very, very strongly, especially at PM, right? Like PM has what's called soft fiat. It's not real, like it's not a real thing. It's like a concept, which is just that PM gets to really define how the debate is going to go on. Because like if you use certain words to describe parts of the debate, then there's a huge cost to switching words later on in the round for any other team because it just becomes more confusing. So people use your words, and if your words benefit you, then good for you. So for example, I think there's a PM speech workshop by Noam Dahan where he says this, in the cult of productivity motion, everyone who calls it cult of productivity when they're trying to support it is kind of missing out. They should change it instantly because cult of productivity sounds really bad. In the same way, you might want to use different words, right? Um, and of course, weaponize your weighing metrics very clearly, very early. So weighing is something where style and storytelling is very useful, simply because certain parts of weighing are often like they're basically comparing different moral intuitions. If you think about it, you are using as much logical machinery as you can, but at the core of weighing, you do have some level of moral intuitions about what matters more. And those moral intuitions are sometimes more persuasive when they're more intuitive. And of course, being more intuitive is something you can do well if you have good style. How do you cover your weaknesses? Well, if your style is a bit too much. So, for example, I know there was a round where I spoke against a speaker, and in their LO speech, they were very dramatic, like very, very dramatic. But they were being dramatic about defending perfect gods, and they didn't have much analysis about the characterization of why those gods are good. And it ended up working very badly against them because the more emotional like power you put into the word, the more the expectation from the judge rises, right? Like, do you actually have the logic to back that up? And when you don't have the reasoning to back it up, you instantly lose credibility and trust. And you open yourself up to very, very big sort of this person has no clue what they're talking about vibes from the next speaker. And if you're talking about sensitive topics, don't do that. That's a really, really big weakness that you can have in your style. Make sure that you focus on signposting and key terms, right? You want to make sure that the judge knows what you're doing. And you might have to spend more time to sound nice, and you might want to think about whether that time might be better spent elsewhere, like thinking about like your impacting or your mechanization. Because I do know that style is something that comes naturally to some people, but at least to me and a lot of people I've talked to, it takes a lot of effort. You have to write down examples. You have to specifically underline the words you want to stress on. You want to like pick different words, think about it, think about how you're going to present it. That's time you can use for other things. So do think about that. All right. So that's all four styles that I'm talking about. All right. So now let's talk about practice very quickly. Okay. How do you practice being a first speaker? The first thing and the most important thing, one skill at a time. Okay. I know we're all brain rotting as we scroll through 5 billion shorts and reels every day. We're switching between 5,000 things all the time. Don't do that. You cannot improve if you do multiple skills at anywhere near the same rate as if you focus on one skill. You can switch it up. You can do like one skill for like some time, and second skill for another time, but don't go to a third one. And don't go to a fourth one, then a fifth one, a sixth. Focus on one thing, like for a week at least, and keep drilling and keep speaking. Even if you do spar, like of course you're using every skill. Try to focus on that one skill. So mechanization, rebuttal, and so on. Um, Someone wants a structure. Good question. So the reason I'm not talking about the very basic stuff on first speeches, like basic structure of how to give a first speech, is because there's amazing workshops that do exactly that. So I'm very happy to just link those to you, Akash. I will link that in a second as soon as I'm done with this. How do you practice then? What else do you do? You take a motion and you prep, right? You can prep for as long as you want, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, and then record yourself giving a speech on it. Okay, it's really important to record yourself. Now if you ever heard your own voice, it's probably one of the most painful experiences in the world, right? Like you would not be able to, like, unless you hold a gun to my head, I would not do this recreationally. Unfortunately, you do have to do that to get better as a debater. So listen to your voice, which will be very painful, I know, but you have to do it. And listen to the problems in your speech. And trust me, this is very eye opening. Most of the things that you do wrong are nowhere near as obvious to you as you might think they are. The second you start listening to your own speeches, you just be like, what am I saying here? Like, what does this mean? Why am I saying this? And it's a lot better to get that feedback from yourself than like some random judge who's just like, you're stupid, you didn't do this right. So that's one thing. Re-deliver the speech, as many times as you want to. Or you can switch to a different motion, that's fine as well. You can work on the same skill in a different motion. But this is the most common drill, right? And I know there's like a little story, I don't know if it's true, that Michael Dunn Gokjian, who was one of the best speakers, I think he top spoke in the World Championships as well, of his time, and also of all time, according to a lot of people. He spoke a PM speech every morning to the mirror to get better. And you could do that if you think that helps. Um, I have done something similar, but with PMLO spars, and I can confirm that works. I don't know about speeches in the washroom because I personally find it more helpful when I'm with someone else. But drills by yourself can also be helpful, which brings me to PMLO spars. So PMLO spars are the simplest logistical thing to arrange in debating, right? At all. It's just you and a friend. Okay, it doesn't even need to be a friend. It can just be some random person from some debate group. So for those of you with no friends, you're fine. You're debating. You're not alone. So give each other feedback. And here's the really cool part. Okay, so this is what really makes PMLO spars very useful. If you can get this to work, um, give each other feedback on the other person's weaknesses. Right? Think about what that means. The other person knows what they're messing up, but they also know that you know what they're messing up. Now, you already have an incentive to fix your weaknesses, But now you don't just have to fix your weaknesses because you need to get better. You're debating the guy that now knows what to target, right? So if you don't fix those weaknesses, you lose. And you also know exactly how to attack the other person's weaknesses. And this way, you're going to improve a lot faster for a lot of reasons. The first one being you don't want to lose, obviously. But the second one is just like it's a very intense set of pressures on you where everyone knows they need to improve faster than the other person to win that spar. Um, and on top of that, you also need to be tactical with your cases because you now know that that person is now fixing their weaknesses and now they've come up to with a new weakness. And that makes you a dynamic speaker as well. So PMLO spars are a great way to practice for speaker speeches. You can also watch PMLO speeches and try to beat them, you know. Uh, so that also helps. You'll notice I've put level up notifications on the side. Important thing about those notifications are actually relevant. They're letting you pick how to distribute skill points or perks. In normal people speak, that means it is how you distribute the gains of your practice and your experience. When you work on your speaking skills, you are doing the same thing. You are not just getting better, you're getting better at different things. And of course, you get better at everything a little bit over time anyway. But you need to keep track of the fact that you do have a skill set of different things you can do. And you need to know what you can do well and what you can do badly. So think of it like very carefully in terms of what you want to do as a speaker, right? If you want to be a very well-rounded speaker and just be good at everything, then you could do like you could focus on the weak points and you could just make up for all your weaknesses and keep fixing your weakest points until you're like a very well-rounded speaker. And that's a great way to improve. And a lot of people do that. And of course, you should always do that anyway in general, right? Like you don't want your weak points to stand out. But sometimes it's really important to just work on the thing that your team needs right now. Like, for example, you might be struggling a little bit more with like framing, but what your team really needs, and the reason your team is losing, is because you don't have enough mechanization. So even though you're good at mechanization, you need to get even better because that is the thing you keep getting feedback with your partner for because your partner doesn't like mech and isn't very good at mech. Well, suck it up. Debate is a team sport. So sometimes you want to make decisions about your skill sets that have to do with the strategy of your teams and the strategy of your individual speeches and might not reflect what intuitively seems obvious. So again, think about those things. All right. I think that's all of my slides. Yep. All right. So now I'm going to take questions. I'm going to send Akash a more basic workshop. So for those of you who want like a really simple, basic sort of how to give first speeches workshop, I'm linking one right now, which I find quite useful. Actually, I'm going to link multiple because I think there's a really good workshops on this. All right. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to message them in chat. If not, then you know, I'm so glad I was super like convincing. Yes, Guhan, what's up?
Yeah. Hi. Am I audible?
Yep. No,
Yeah.
you're Guhan, right?
Yeah. Okay. I have a two-part question. Firstly, I was rewatching your 2023 Madrid quarterfinals. Great speech, by the way. But in your prep time, when you know you are going right before a turf burner, like for example Keto, how would that affect your mentality? Because whenever I'm going right before someone who speaks incredibly like in Mach speed and they burn a lot of material and then they're like 18 mechanisms, why, how, like, do you just pull a room in and like try to outframe them, or like what is your thought process in the prep time? Because I want to get better at that. Once you answer this, I'll ask the second question.
Sure. So this is a very specific question about turf burning. So I'm going to note this down. Turf burning opponents. Um, can you tell me your second question? I can answer it in order based on. So I'll take a
Oh,
few
okay,
questions and then try
cool.
to answer them in the order that's most logical.
Amazing. Yeah, for the second question, I am a current PM whip trying to go as deputy whip. So whipping is the same. So in top half, when I'm when I'm trying to switch from first to second speaker, I know what I need to take from my first speaking in order to go to in order to be the deputy that I want myself to be. But what would you prefer? Like, what PM skills do you think I need to emphasize more on? Obviously, they are round dependent, motion dependent, and stuff like that. But in general, because I've not deputied a lot, and I've seen you do both in top half. So, like, what do you think is the common denominator in both speaker roles, right?
Great. Cool questions. Does anyone else have any other questions? So just I'll note them all down. Guide a little bit on case prep also. What exactly is the best way to prep? Oh, fantastic question, by the way, just because I have a specific answer for that. Does anyone else have any other questions? I'll just answer all these together.
Yeah, I also have one.
Yes, Pragun, go ahead.
Yeah. Uh, the problem that I face, and specifically in like higher level of rooms, is that when I go as PM and there's a good team on like the opposition opening up, they probably like try to find some flaws. Though I try to preempt those arguments and say that the op cannot run this and that because for and so reasons, but somehow I am just able to fuck that up at the end moment. Is there any particular drill or some in
How to
any
do
workshop that
preemptions?
is, yeah?
Yes. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So let's start with the ones that I think I can answer a bit more quickly. So I think the fastest answer I can give to preempt is to preemptions. So preemptions are really complicated. So there's no way I can tell you how to do each of them just because like preempting an argument is so many steps, right? It's predicting the correct argument, predicting the part of that argument that's the most likely to be necessary for you to prove is wrong, connecting that to your argument, and so on. First, I'm going to send you a link. This is a workshop by Sajid Khandakar. It is great. It explains a structure of PM speeches that I think is very intelligent and I think is very helpful, which is that you make arguments comparatively so they integrate responses into them. So that's a good way to preempt arguments. Instead of trying to say they're going to say this and it's not going to work, you make an argument, and within that argument, you disprove the other side, right? Or you flip it. Okay. The other question that I can answer quickly is how to prep. So I've got a sound effect for this. That's the answer. So here's how a good first speaker preps. All right. They shut up. So communicating is great. You should communicate. All right. So don't take me to be like very literal or like, oh, this is exactly what you have to do or all you have to do. But you are writing your first speech throughout prep, pretty much, right? So you know what isn't going on in your brain, right? You don't need to deliver that information to yourself. You do need to tell your partner the basic idea of what you're going to do, but you know the mechs because they're in your head. So what's the most productive thing you can do? It's to shut up, right? And it's very hard for a lot of us because we're all yappers. But just shut up and listen. And what happens is you don't need to listen to everything, right? So this is the magic of PMLO speakers. You spend 15 minutes telling them like 55 pages of content, and they'll say like three of those pages. Why? Because they think the other 52 are either irrelevant or stupid, right? So you just sort through the material your partner is going to keep throwing at you and structure it as you go. But okay, the basic structure for case prep, right? 2 to 3 minutes in the beginning to think about what you think the best case is. What do you think is the most intuitive argument? Settle on it. Then think of the burdens for that argument, okay? And then analyze those burdens by thinking of reasons for each of those burdens to be true throughout throughout the prep time. Write those reasons down and remember, every time you give a reason something is true, make a comparative. Explain why it is true on your side and not true on their side, or for example, worse on their side. Once you're done with all of that, you're kind of done, right? Like the rest of the stuff about, positioning, setting up what your partner wants to do, that comes at a more advanced level. So that's kind of the basic structure of prep. Okay, the other two questions, dealing with turf burners and also skills in PM that you can use in deputy. Okay, so I think I'll start with the turf burning question. So first of all, um, it's pretty funny people are still watching the round of me You know what? I won't be so negative. Fine. I'm glad that you think it was a fun round. And yes, debating Cato is annoying. Now, I will say two things. First of all, the reason it's annoying to debate someone like Matt Cato is actually not because he turf burns. As you know, the CO went through in that round, so clearly there was enough content in back half after Matt and Ahmed's speeches. If anything, Ahmed was turf burning in that round. But Matt frames. So the funny thing is, if you ask me what I was thinking or how to beat a speaker like that, I can't outframe Matt because that's what he does really well. Like his skill set is framing. It's not just mechanization or rebuttal. His strongest skill is framing. He's very good at framing. Now in general, if your speaker is turf burning, if someone runs a lot of content, right, and it's good content, right, it's good quality content, it's very relevant content, and it's better content than you're just going to lose. Okay, so like if the reality of the situation is that this person can run more content than you and they can run it at a better quality or at the same quality as you're probably just going to lose. The truth of the matter is that's not what most people who are turf burners do. They run content at lower quality just because of how time works, right? They have less time per argument. And so they often are much more easy to outframe, like you said correctly. In that case, what you could do is focus heavily on identifying why your specific argument's metric is more important than the other metrics that they want to use. So, for example, this could be a stakeholder, even, right? So, we're talking about an election debate, and you're saying that this is very important for swinging the vote in some context because of some reason. Explain why that context and reason is more important in terms of impact than any other context or reason by just explicitly identifying the extent of your case first, right? That's often very helpful. So when people turf burn, they never explain the extent of what they prove. They just say something, but they never prove the detail of it. Again, unfortunately, some people do prove the extent. I think Cato, for example, did prove the extent of a lot of his arguments. If that's happening, this won't work. But if they're really just running like five arguments, they don't prove them very well, just be like, okay, how much is this really going to affect the world? Like they're overclaiming their impacts. Then weigh and be like, the big impact we have is much more important than these tiny, tiny things that might happen or might not happen. Um, and how do you do that in leader speaker? Just like write down the obvious stuff that op is going to run and think of all the arguments they want to run and then identify the ones that are probably not the best. So the thing is, in any debate, there's like a lot of arguments, but obviously some of them are more intuitive than the others. That's how top half and back half works. So if they're running like five arguments, three of them are probably unintuitive. So just start by going like, this debate isn't about these three stupid things. And then about the two strong arguments, just be like, these are the burdens they need to fulfill. Here's why they're not correct, and then move on. And integrating that into your speech is the best thing you can do. So that's how you deal with turf burners generally. But again, turf burning, first of all, isn't really a thing, I think, in BP debating. It really doesn't work. And it's more of a threat for back half than it is for like a leader speaker. Um, but second of all, I think turf burning can work if you're strategic about it, but it's generally not like the most amazing strategy. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, the
fair.
final question was about deputy. Sorry, yeah, Guhan, what's up?
No, no, I said fair enough. I was
Yes, yes.
okay
So
with that.
I'll just answer the deputy question. Let me take this final one from Prisha as well. What is this? How do you divide arguments with your second speaker? Which argument is best to pick as a first speaker? Stock and intuitive or something unique, which requires a lot of mech and framing. Okay. Let me answer the deputy question along with this actually. So that's a good question, and it'll help answer the deputy question as well. Okay. First, how do you divide arguments? This implies the deputy runs an extension. Now the deputy can run an extension. Okay, and that is a totally valid strategy. Okay, that's totally valid. It's just not necessarily the best one in all cases. Okay, so you really do not need your second speaker to run an argument. Okay, you really don't. You can just do very strong rebuttal. In fact, the best, safest thing you can do is that your deputy speaker runs something that directly clashes with the other side's argument, and that's their argument, right? Like their rebuttal. That's a very safe way to keep yourself, on clash. But let's say you do have two arguments. How do you divide them? Go back to what I said here, right? We go back to, where is it? Uh, here, 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 right? Follow these steps, right? What skill set is needed to win the best argument? Okay. And which one of you is good at that? So, if your partner is really, really good at proving that something matters, and this debate is about what is more important, then you can give the important part, the part of the argument that's proving something is important to your partner, and you can give the mechanization to yourself, okay? Or vice versa. If you're really good at proving that something is important, then you can focus on that, and your partner can focus on defending the mech. Of course, that just means you do less of each thing. That doesn't mean you don't do them at all. Remember, that's about how to split up an argument between two people, and that's what I would recommend. Okay, BP is not a sport that really rewards 5,000 arguments. It rewards the quality of your contribution, and your contribution could be one argument or 25 arguments. It doesn't matter. It's the persuasive value that it adds, and five arguments is not better than one argument by default. That's just not the case. So that's the first thing. Second, if you are dividing arguments, right? If you really are dividing arguments, pick the argument for your second speaker that works with your strategy. I know this is not a very helpful answer, but like if your strategy is to push really, really hard your case, and your second argument is pushing the case even harder, like for example, you have like one impact and you have a second argument that defends that impact, then it's probably cool to have them say like the extending part and you like doing the setup part. But if your case is like, I'm going to win this clash and I'm going to fight this clash to a wash, then you probably want to ask yourself again, which skill are you both good at? If you're better at rebuttal, do the wash stuff or like the rebuttal flip thing. And if you're better at constructor, do the constructive stuff. So, it depends on your skill set. Which is what I'm going to bring to Guhan's question about switching to deputy. First, it's about your skills more than what you do in PM and LO. So, what are you good at? But second, there are some things that PM and deputies just always need to do, right? So leader speeches need to be clear, they need to be structured, they need to have good analysis, they need to make the debate clear, they need to push that analysis in a way that's intuitive, right? So the thing you probably have developed as a leader speaker is that you can very quickly come up with arguments, right? And at least that means you are capable of defending your first speaker very well. So if that's the case, remember to make sure that your first speaker uses whatever skill they're very good at. So for example, if you were a first speaker and you were very good at mech, your second speaker is also good at mech, but they're even better at, let's say, impacting. Okay. Tell them you don't need to focus that much on mech. You can do impacting. I'll just defend the mech and win in that context. So that's something I actually did myself when I switched with one of my partners who was, of course, very, very good at everything, but I was better at mech compared to his skills at impacting and framing. And so he did the framing and impacting, and I did the mech. Um, Again, you could be better than your partner at both things. You could be worse than your partner at both things. I would argue at some point, at the beginning of my debate career, I was worse than my partner at both things. I just did what I was comparatively better at. So that's one thing. You can use your mech skills quite a lot if you're really good at mech and first speaker. The second thing about deputy is very strategic and very much like dynamic and responsive. You need to really read the room about what's going on and shift the strategy the second anything happens. um, you need to use the skill set you've developed and prep for that. So you know how you try to predict the whole round and then you try to make a speech that wins the round in leader speakers. In deputy, that prediction engine needs to stay on like throughout the round. And in PMLO, sometimes you can kind of give a speech and go to sleep. Deputy, you honestly can't even go to sleep after your speech is done, because most deputies, I think, will probably agree with me on this, is just like you're like constantly awake listening to back half, thinking of what POIs to ask.